Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. It's I realize we still have people joining the webinar, but I thought we'd make a good start. So this is welcome to this webinar, which is hosted jointly by Practical Action and UN Habitat, where we're sharing the findings of our exciting new report, Managing Our Waste. We'll be making the case in this webinar today for why we need a people-first, people-centered approach to how we plan and take action on the global solid waste management crisis. So first of all, I wanted to pass over to Francesca from UN Habitat from the Waste Wise Cities program.
Thank you, Lucy. And good morning or good afternoon to everyone connected here today. And thank you, Practical Action, for inviting UN Habitat to co-launch this report, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Before I dig a bit in, let me mention a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, the event is recorded, so I hope this is comfortable for everyone. And if you have any questions, while we will hear the speakers talking, kindly post it in the chat, so then later when we are going to have our Q&A sessions, we can read them and they can be answered. Also, you can also specify if the question is addressed to a particular speaker. So as Lucy said, my name is Francesca Calisesi. I am working for the solid waste management team of the Urban Basic Services section of UN Habitat in Nairobi, Kenya, our headquarters. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today and to co-launch the report, Managing Our Waste 2021, View from the Global South, and to hear more about the findings of this report. We know that the report is highlighting inequalities, especially in the urban context of the Global South, in terms of access of solid waste collection services, with the informal settlements being the most neglected and deprived. The report that was developed by Practical Action, who is also an affiliate of the Waste Wise Cities global program of UN Habitat, and with whom UN Habitat has been already having some activities and sharing some information and data on their work on the ground. This report and the research is based on the UN Habitat Waste Wise Cities tool, with additional qualitative and participatory methods to better understand what is happening on the ground. For those who don't know, Waste Wise Cities tool is an assessment and monitoring methodology for a city municipal solid waste management system based on one of the SDG indicators, 1161, for which UN Habitat is custodian agency. From the report, we learn that what is really needed at the moment is to urgently put people back at the center of our narratives and of our action. And UN Habitat is a strong believer of this people-centered approach. And in fact, one of the UN Habitat flagship program is people-centered smart cities. So also UN Habitat is advocating to take advantage of the technologies and urban digital transformation and use it to put at the service of the people, to make sure that people are at the center, and especially the most vulnerable categories, such as the urban poor, so that the action, the solutions, or the interventions that we are going to propose are gonna effectively and for real address the needs of the people and improve their living conditions, and in this case, access to the very basic urban basic services to ensure that no one and no place is left behind. So I'm very excited now to hear more about the report and how we can work with the people for the people. So I'm now handing over to Sarah Roberts, the CEO of the Practical Action, who will tell us more about the report. Sarah, over to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm looking at all the chat box and seeing how many people we've got from all over the world joining us, all time zones. Thank you for those of people who've got up very early. Thank you for people who are breaking their day to be part of this webinar. We've got the most amazing set of panelists from all different parts of the system. So I think you're in for a great hour and a half. So I'm just going to frame this a little bit, just to explain why we as Practical Action are focusing on this at the moment. We're an international development and change making group. We've been around for 55 years, and our mission is to support people to lift themselves out of poverty, and then to make sure that we change the systems that keep people poor and vulnerable, so that that situation doesn't perpetuate and we get sustainable change. We work in 4 key focus areas that we think really are key to making a difference to people living in poverty. So that's energy that transforms, farming that works, climate and resilience, of course. And this work that we're going to be talking about today fits in our Cities Fit for People portfolio. And you know, the purpose of what we're doing is to ensure that we change things so that they really work for people, for planet, and that we get the big change that we need and that endures. And I think if you look at the statistics, which I'm sure people on this call know even better than I do, if we look at the urbanization statistics and then we look at the state of waste management services for people living in cities, and particularly people living in low income and slum communities, the results, as we're going to be discussing shortly, are truly shocking. And if you look at the urbanization statistics, we are sitting on a problem that is only going to grow and grow and needs some really radical change. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion that's going to come next, to look at what is the reality that are facing people living in different cities across the world. Where are we seeing some really good practice, where services are designed with people at the center of them, and where there's real hope that they will work for the people who already are engaged in incredibly important recycling, waste management work in what are very, very difficult conditions. Where are things not working at all? And I think most importantly, what can we in a range of partnerships do about it? Because it's a truly shocking situation. Everybody deserves these key services wherever you live. And we're going to see cities grow and develop more and more, and we have got to get waste management services right so that everybody gets the services that they deserve. So I'm really, really looking forward to the discussion that's going to come next. But I think what I'm looking forward to even more is what comes after the webinar. I think what Practical Action does is try and work in really bold and far-reaching collaborations with people with a range of different networks and skills and expertise to us, and where we can really add our value to making change happen. So I'm hoping that this launch will spark a whole range in conversations and discussions that then leads to some really meaningful partnership that starts making some inroads into the problem that we're discussing, and takes a different approach to solving the problem that's really going to deliver for the people who are living in the cities and the people who are going to be moving into the cities in the next 20 or 30 years. So I'm going to hand back to Lucy, who is the architect of all of this, and she's going to take us through the report with her colleagues. Then I'm sure we're going to have some very interesting questions and then move on to a panel discussion. So back to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Lucy Stevens. I'm the head of Practical Actions Cities Fit for People programme and also our Director of Influence and Impact. In a moment, just to kick us off, we're going to see a short 5-minute video, which is really going to make sure that help us to focus on, the people who are at the heart of this, story. Just before we do that, I wanted to recognise that, putting this together over the past year, 18 months has been really difficult time for everyone. So I'm hugely grateful to our country teams, our consultants, and to all the community level people and service providers who helped us to provide us with the information we need and made this work possible in the midst of a global pandemic. And also recognising all of those frontline waste workers who continue to serve us every day and have continued to do so over the past couple of years. So with that in mind, we're going to see a quick 5 minutes video, if we can do that now. I think Christine is helping with that.
আমাদের বাড়ির ময়লাটা আমাদের সমাজের ময়লাটা আমরা 10টা পরিবারের ময়লা একখানেই ফেলি, ওখান থেকে ওগুলো পরিষ্কার করা হয় না। যে ময়লাগুলো থাকে ওখানে পচে যায়, কাগজ, পলিথিন, প্লাস্টিক, আমরা ওগুলো পুড়াই দিই। ময়লা ফেলালে ওই দুর্গন্ধ বেরোয়, বাচ্চারা অসুস্থ হয়ে পড়ে।
সাতক্ষীরা কনটেক্সটে যদি বলি, পুরুষের তুলনায় নারীরা বা শিশুরা কিন্তু বেশি এফেক্টেড হচ্ছে এবং এর ফলে যদি অব্যবস্থাপনাটা হয়, এটার যে স্মেল, ব্যাড স্মেল এবং এটার পলিথিন বা অন্যান্য যেসব আইটেম যেটা আসলে অপচনশীল, সেটা পোড়ানোর ফলে সেটার যে গন্ধ বা ধোঁয়াটা আসছে, সেটা কিন্তু বাড়িতে অনেক সময় প্রেগনেন্ট মহিলা থাকে, অনেক সময় বয়স্ক লোক থাকে, শিশুরা থাকে এবং নারীরাই সবসময় অবস্থান করে। সো এটার যে ব্যাড ইম্প্যাক্ট সেটা কিন্তু নারীদেরই গ্রহণ করতে হচ্ছে পুরুষের তুলনায়। সো আমি বলতেই পারি যে আসলে nariraj beshi affected.
Na majirani, umejua mwingine anaweza kuja anamwaga takataka tu, na hapa tulikuwa tuna manage tu kidogo kidogo kama wenye wanaishi karibu na takataka, mimi na huyu jirani, kufagia na kuchoma choma. Niseme last month tukapata hii kampani ya nini inaitwa gasi ya poa, hiyo yenye ni but now unaweza peleka hata kiti ukae urelax tu hapo kidogo.
Parce que wàllu mbalit la, il suffit que nga ne buuju maan laa rek am na feneen fu ñu lay féetalee, dañ lay xeeb wala ñu am feneen foo xam ne ñu ngi la fay féetalee quoi, mais daan sa doole la. da ngay xëy suba moo nekk liggéey boo xam ne da ngay xëy suba for jaay।
বলে পাশে যাওয়া যাবে না, আমাদের সমাজে আমরা খুব অবহেলিত। কেন আমরা অবহেলিত না? আমরা যদি শহরে না থাকতাম তাহলে মানুষ, এই শহরের মানুষ বসবাস করতে পারত না। একদিন সাথে আমরা ময়লার কাছে অফ করে দিই, তাহলে শহর একদম দুর্গন্ধিতে মানুষ এই শহর ছেড়ে পালাবে। তাহলে আমরা সমাজের কারণে আসলে আমরা উচিত থাকতে পারবো না। এখন আমরা কি সমাজকে আবর্জনা, আমাকে আবর্জনা পরিষ্কার বলি, আমাকে আবর্জনা হয়েছে কিন্তু শহরে নাকি না? আমাকে আমার প্রতিষ্ঠা পাবো না, আর আমরা উঁচু করে চলতে পারবো না, সমাজে উঁচু করে চলতে পারবো না। আমাদের তো সমাজে উঁচু করে চলার অধিকার আছে।
ବୋତଲରେ ରହିବ, ଏଇଟା ଜରିରେ ରହିବ, ଏଇଟା ଗୁଡ଼ିଆରେ ରହିବ, ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ଲାଷ୍ଟିକ୍, ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ହେବ। ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ଜରିଟା ବି ଅଲଗା ଟାଇପ୍ର ହେବ, ମାନେ ଏଇ ଜରିଟା ଅଲଗା ଇଏର ହେବ। ତାପରେ ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ଲୁହା ଗୁଡ଼ା ଲୁହାରେ ହେବ, ଟିଣ ଗୁଡ଼ା ଟିଣରେ ହେବ, ଏମିତି ହେଇକିନା ହେବ।
comme ni nga ko gisee nii rek damay ñëw for dajale ba mu bëri nga trier trier maanaam boo ko gisee mooy viande yi nga def fee doo bujumaan du sànni lu ñu sànni rek soxla na ko.
biteel mbalit yëpp rek ay ñam yi xam nga nit ñi moom bu nekk biir kër bu nekk mbalit mu nekk lañ ciy def.
আমরা শুনেছি আমাদের পাশের এলাকায় পৌরসভা থেকে গাড়ি এসে ময়লা পরিষ্কার করে নিয়ে যায়। যদি খুব তাড়াতাড়ি আমাদের জন্য ওই সুবিধাটা হতো, যদি এভাবে কেউ 20-50 টাকা দিয়ে পরিষ্কার করে দিত আমার জন্য আরো ভালো হতো। সেটাও দিতাম, আমার জন্য ভালো হতো, আরো পরিবেশটা ভালো থাকতো।
Kazi ya takataka yanisaidia sana vile mimi jinsi najionea. Nishanisaidia kwa maneno mengi, naona vile jinsi pia ya kuelewana na kila jirani, jinsi ya kuongea na kila mtu. Tena yanisaidia na inapata pia naweza kuongea na watu katika lugha nyingi. Kama pia wamefurahi, pia mimi ni wanaacha kama nimefurahi pia.
আমরা যে মানুষের উপকার করতে পারি, যে শহরটা পরিষ্কার পরিচ্ছন্ন রাখতে পারি, এটা নিজেদের কাছে খুবই ভালো লাগে। কেননা যে একটা মানুষ সকালবেলা বাড়ি থেকে বাইরে দেখে যদি নোংরা পরিবেশ বা রাস্তায় একটা কিছু পড়ে যাচ্ছে, এতে মানুষের অসুবিধা হয়। বিধায় আমরা যে মানুষের যে উপকার মানে যে ময়লা পরিষ্কার করে যে শহরটা পরিষ্কার রাখি, নিজেদের কাছে খুবই ভালো লাগে।
Okay, well, thank you very much. Waste management is not just about waste, it's also about people. So now we're going to take a few minutes, perhaps 25 minutes to half an hour, to run through some of the key findings and points from the report. One of the first things that I wanted to say about this, I think, is that, actually we're delighted that our patron, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, has written the foreword to this report, recognising the severity of the crisis and warmly welcoming the report and encouraging readers to follow its lead in putting people at the heart of a rapid transition to a more sustainable future of waste utilisation. The work started from that simple observation that waste management problems are conventionally described and measured in terms of material flows and environmental impacts, but yet this is a human problem with major social, health, and economic impacts, which are felt most acutely by some of the world's poorest people. We know the scale of the crisis is increasing. The amount of solid waste that's being generated in lower-income cities in Africa and Asia is predicted to double by 2030, and that 90% is openly dumped or burned in low-income countries. And yet, at the same time, data overall, we actually know quite little about this problem. Data is limited and is poor quality. That's something that UN Habitat is really trying to address in its role as custodian of SDG indicator 11.6.1 on this. But in comparison with other sectors, like the wealth of data available in the WASH sector, we are a long way behind. And the proportion of development aid that goes to the sector is still small. And in fact, often only when we talk about solid waste management in major reports, it tends to also focus on the material flows and less on the people who are at the heart of those solutions. So in our report, we consider 4 case studies to try to make sure that we explore how we can put people back at the heart of this question. And those are a variety of sizes and types of town and city. That's because also we recognize that there are tens of thousands of secondary towns around the world which house, in fact, the majority of the urban population. So we need to make sure that the context and issues that are facing those secondary towns are also valued as much as megacities. The two case studies that we look at from Asia are in that category of secondary towns. One of them is the town of Satkhira in Bangladesh, with a population of 170,000. It's on the larger end of secondary towns. It's located in the southwest part of Bangladesh, near the border with West Bengal of India. In India, the smallest town that we look at is the town of Dhenkanal, which has a population of 74,000 or so, located in the eastern state of Odisha, a little inland. It's a town, a state, in fact, with a proud cultural heritage, along with, but actually, at least up to a few years ago, had one of the worst records in access to basic services, although the state has really done a lot to address that in the last few years. In Africa, we look at two case studies. One is the city of Kisumu in Kenya. Kisumu is Kenya's third largest urban centre and a population of a little over 500,000, located in the west. It is in a way a little bit remote from the capital city, but it's at the same time at the hub of the local economy that surrounds Lake Victoria. And the largest of our case studies is the city of Dakar in Senegal, the capital city of Senegal, home to 2.5 million people or more. It's actually located on a narrow, highly urbanized peninsula, which constrains it around its space around the sea. We, in looking at the information in each of these case studies, we used a couple of different tools, which we feel are sort of state of the art for making sure we could capture all of the relevant information. One of those is the WasteWise Cities tool, and that Francesca introduced at the beginning, a great tool for helping you to understand the material that is collected, the flows and so on, at a citywide level. And the second is the Waste Aware benchmark indicators. That gives you a good map at the citywide level of some of the key indicators, physical indicators of the quality of waste management, and also some of the governance issues that relate to it around financing, provider and user inclusivity, and another number of other indicators of that nature. So we also did that exercise for each of the 4 case studies. Finally, in terms of methodologies, you'll see in the report that we have married quantitative and a large amount of qualitative, rich, ground level information. And one of the things that we've also shown is to create a ladder for basic services. This is something that has existed before, but we adapted and updated it. We felt to better reflect what we were hearing from people on the ground. Ladders for basic services have existed for a long time. They are completely commonplace in the WASH sector. Here's what they look like and are well known in the WASH sector. You'll see that they grade the extent to which people have access to services from the best in the darker coloured bars at the bottom of safely managed services, moving up to being able to see the proportion of people in these dark orange bars at the top who have no service. So in the case of sanitation, for example, this represents people who are open defecating. They have no access to service at all. It would be fantastic to have commonly used these kinds of ladders for solid waste management, and that's what we're trying to promote, because it helps us to take the focus to add the focus on material flows with something that relates to the service that people get in waste management. And we'll see how that came out and the results of that as we move through. Overall, the key message that we're putting out fell into 4 themes that you can see here. And we explore those themes in all of the case studies. But for the sake of this presentation, what we'll do is we'll highlight one of them in relation to each case study so that we get a flavor from all of the 4 locations that we explored. All of these 4 are what we think is really important for creating people-centered solutions. One of them is about citizens and the service they need, reaching everyone with waste services they need. Another is about the types of waste and what matters to people. So how can we tackle the waste that affects people the most? Another is about service providers. How can we work to improve the lives and working conditions of informal waste workers? And finally, about city managers whose voices are heard, and also the voices of cities themselves in wider decision making. So in the report, yeah, we cover all these areas, but we'll focus on one each from each of the case studies. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Noémie Delabrosse who is a consultant at Oxford Policy Management and has supported us with this with this research, and she's going to take us through the first 2 case studies in Dakar and Kisumu.
Great. Hi everybody. So yeah, I will kickstart straight away then. And so this case study is particularly helpful in helping us unpacking the challenge around reaching everybody from low to high income levels with the waste services that they actually need. And we thought the Dakar case study was particularly good to illustrate that point. Lucy, can you move through the slides for me? So we've had a brief introduction on Dakar, but essentially if you look at the map on the right, this is to give you an idea of where we've been focusing the research. What's very useful is that we've gone beyond Dakar city in itself, which is marked in red on the map, to encompass like a broader variety of situations in Pekin, Cité Lobatfal and Malika, which are marked on the map, ranging from low to middle income settlements, to not only capture the perception and the experience of people living in the capital city in Dakar itself. What's interesting in the region is the amount of waste generated. We often talk about volumes of waste, and that's an illustration of that. There's between 2,300 and 2,600 tons of waste generated each day in Dakar department, so the red zone alone. And we know that about over 50% of this goes straight to landfill, and that landfill is located right next to the low-income area of Malika, you can see on the map. And so that focus in Dakar has been very much on collection, unsegregated collection and disposal for years. And it's decades of this policy of everything must go to landfill that have led to this point, to a situation with very limited recycling for a city of that size and that scale. And this is what's interesting for us in terms of understanding the impacts on communities and on waste workers directly. So what we know, and the research has shown, is a variety of service providers ranging from private, public, and informal recyclers. But let me take you a bit more into the details here in the next slide. Yeah, so what's interesting with this waste service ladder, that it shows you that 99% of households, as we know it, have access to a waste collection service of some kind, whether it is collection or bringing waste straight to a disposal point. What's really interesting is like this ladder highlights inequalities in services between the higher income being much better served, which is not a huge surprise. But interestingly, if you look at Malika, the lower income settlement, you still find that about a third of people have access to a very decent level of service. Whereas Point E, the higher income area of Dakar, is not able to reach full service, so in dark blue, because of the lack of separation of waste at household level. So this is really interesting to show that collection is not the only important aspect of a good waste service. and that wide inequalities really exist between the richer and the poorer neighborhoods. And that's really evident when you start taking into account the quality of service and not only the collection rate in itself. So I think what we wanted to bring out with this case study is the interesting thing about collection, right? Which is that if you look at Dakar as a city, there's a high level of waste collection level. Household satisfaction with the collection system is actually quite high. So where is the problem? And it really seems like it's around the unequal or uneven quality on frequency and regularity of the service. So while waste is being collected away from the homes, it doesn't mean that it goes much further away than the neighborhood. So that doesn't guarantee waste-free neighborhoods. So we've seen that although the satisfaction is high in terms of removing waste in the first place, the second stage of transport away from neighborhoods doesn't always happen and causes really a lot of actually illegal dump sites within or near the neighborhoods. And that remains a really big issue. So overall, the paradox is interesting because where collection services are the most effective is actually where you see the least engagement from households in separating waste at source. And that means that the worse the collection service is, in lower income settlements of Dakar in particular, the more households actually separate their waste for collectors and traders to purchase and recycle away. And so what we find really interesting here is the impact that this has on people. And this is what the survey did. It was about verifying the perceptions that people had of that indiscriminate waste disposal in those low-income areas. And in Dakar, it just speaks for itself, right? Because in Malika and Peking, those low-income areas of Dakar, well, people vastly responded that obviously indiscriminate waste disposal had a significant impact on their community. And you see this proportion in green reducing as you go higher in terms of income levels of the population in Pointe or Cité Lobatfal, but also in level of service. So overall, in Dakar, still at this point, you've got close to 70% of households who would say that this is causing a significant impact in the area they live in. And I think what's interesting as well to look at is really where the challenge of reaching everyone with this with a service they actually need and is adapted to their needs. Where does it come from, and how does it actually link to the capacity of the service providers themselves to step in and provide the services? Because ultimately this depends on how integrated the service providers and the service provision system really is. So what this slide is showing us is the work we've done with the waste aware indicators. So on the left, you can see this diagram is showing the way Dakar is performing in many regards. And I want to focus on provider inclusivity here. What this is telling us is that about 60% is the score that Dakar scores. And it's relatively comparatively to other cities in Africa. It's quite a high inclusivity score, but that mostly reflects the inclusion of the formal collections services and businesses. Because in Dakar, about 13% of Dakar's waste is recovered and recycled, but that's mostly provided by private and informal waste pickers and traders. So although the sector is fairly well organized with an association, it's not very well integrated. There's an association called Bokdion in Dakar, which is registered with thousands of waste pickers and traders. But interestingly, they have a very limited voice. They've managed to lobby against the closure of the dump site to protect their livelihoods, but this is exactly what we're talking about here. Being organized doesn't necessarily mean being heard. Next slide. Yes, so this is a way to really wrap up what the message here is in terms of waste management and seeing this as a people-centered service. So what this case study does really is to advocate for waste management with a focus not only on waste itself, as Lucy already pointed out. We talk about volume and composition, where the waste ends. And this is really important, and that's why the planning and investments and SDG engagement really revolves around the waste itself, and the new debate around marine and ocean plastic is important to focus on that portion of the waste. What this is showing us is waste also as a service, and what this means for people and for recognizing the impact it has on their neighborhoods beyond the accumulation of physical accumulation of waste itself. So this, I think I'm just going to jump straight into the Kisumu case study as well. So Kisumu is a place I know better for having spent quite a lot of time there. So I think it's a really interesting one to help us unpack the challenge of tackling the waste that affect people like the most, and how they manage this low value waste in places where collection service is actually really poor. So let's unpack that. Kisumu, as we've said, is quite a growing city, and like many fast-growing cities in Africa, increasing volumes of municipal waste are outpacing the authorities' ability to manage it. That's the reality in a lot of places around the continent. And there is very limited separation for recycling. And that's why you can see a lot of orange on the diagram on the right, and very little blue. So the dark blue, the full service, would be corresponds to waste separation at source. And it shows us that even in Tomboya, the higher middle income areas of Kisumu, you've got very few people with a full access to waste services. So it's interesting because Kisumu has about 60% of the population living in low-income settlements. So naturally, that means that a lot of the waste remains uncollected because of the lack of services and the affordability issue around paying for services in the first place. And this is why you've got rates of 81 and 93% of people not receiving any service in low-income areas of the Allenda and Manyata. So we've done a bit more research, really focusing on the private and informal enterprises that are involved in the collection. And I'm going to unpack a few more things on the next slide, specifically around the waste, the types of waste that people find it very difficult to and hard to dispose of because of this lack of effective collection services. What the diagram shows you on the right side is the composition of waste, and it speaks for itself. Most of the waste is essentially food scraps, organic waste. Some is fed to animals, but often this is dumped and doesn't burn very well. So this is a portion really of waste is difficult to deal with. Then there is the dry waste that waste pickers don't want. Some of it is burned, some of it is used for cooking fires. And a big problem in Kisumu, you see it's 11% of the waste is single-use menstrual pads and nappies. And about a quarter of residents in the low-income areas say they really struggle to deal with that in particular. So this slide is really interesting to tell us a bit how people deal with this waste that is difficult to manage. We know that about 65% of households have no access to any sort of waste services across the city. So they've developed coping strategies naturally. In about half of the cases, households just burn the waste to dispose of it. And this is a very common practice, and it's also a really good way to mitigate the public health risks, the flies, the smell. And this is actually even happening in the higher income areas. And we know as well that 66% of low-income households throw their waste directly into pit latrines. And across Kenya and other countries, it's a big problem. You build pit latrines, and they end up being filled with solid waste because there is no other way to dispose of it. And a lot of this comes as a solution to hazardous waste, such as nappies, menstrual pads. So overall, what we're seeing really is an issue around improving collection and the impact this potentially has on recycling opportunities. We've talked about this with Dakar a few minutes ago, and it's the case in Kisumu as well, is that improving collection services does not always support recycling. So there's really a paradox here in seeing municipalities putting a lot of effort on boosting collection services, but actually that sometimes leads to even less recycling within communities. And in Kisumu, like in Dakar, the best instrument to tackle that waste accumulation in communities remains really around waste separation for recycling. And this takes place primarily always in low-income areas. So waste separation we see in Kisumu is actually very low, and it's much higher in low-income communities where there are people coming for recyclable door-to-door service collection. And most of the unsegregated waste is taken straight away to a dumping ground, or can make it to Kachok dump site, which is located in the center, near the center of the city. So overall, this leads to quite a low recycling rate. And once again, it is those informal and private businesses that are really leading the recycling activities that really make a difference in low-income areas. So to wrap this up, really, what this case study is telling us, or calling for, is really a people-centered approach to waste composition beyond the percentage, the composition, the volumes, but also looking at how they affect people and how people manage or cope with that to get rid of them. The organic waste is plentiful in this kind of city. Plastics are light, they're bulky, they're long-lived, and they pollute Lake Victoria near Kisumu, and they're really hard types of waste to cope with. So really strategies here should focus on the waste streams that seem to affect people the most. This is what we're seeing in Kisumu. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So moving on to our last two case studies. In Satkhira in Bangladesh, I think the key thing we are wanting to highlight is the story around the lives and working conditions of informal waste workers. Satkhira in the southwest of Bangladesh, this map shows the locations where we carried out our household survey, and a large drainage canal through the middle of the town. The Conservancy Department of the municipality is responsible for solid waste management. But the most striking thing here is that we found that 84% of households separate waste to give and sell to informal recyclers. So if we look at the waste flows, there's a small proportion of the households at the very top who are served by a large vehicle collection service. Another small proportion, maybe 300 households, that are reached by private collection services. But if we think 84% of households, that's about 29,000, a huge number that are reached by the door-to-door collection of recyclables, itinerant waste buyers who operate right across the town. And although quite a large amount of waste is something they don't collect, some of those organic parts, for example, they actually do manage to do a huge amount. Who are these people then, and what do? They have a wide variety of different roles: pickers, itinerant waste buyers, informal collectors, and larger scale waste traders, and also sweepers who often work on a casual basis for their municipality. Overall, there are around 400 people in a town of this size, and about 120 waste trading businesses who help to deal with and recover an estimated 441 tons of plastic and 78 tons of paper per year from households alone. But almost all of these businesses are unregistered. So one of them is like the family we have here, Parveen and her husband. They collect about 5 to 7 kilograms of waste a day, selling it on from households, selling it on to traders. They found that this business has actually been quite good for them in some ways. They've been able to pay off the debts they'd accumulated from previous businesses and other things. But on the other hand, we discovered that pickers and collectors are suffer a lot of harassment. Women sweepers and pickers feel unsafe and often face abuse. They have a lack of access to basic services and to safety equipment, and they face social exclusion, as we heard in the video. Sometimes they might be accused of handling stolen goods and so on. And even those businesses which are formally registered are not engaged at all with the municipality. There are some good things here, though, as Noemi mentioned in Dakar on a smaller scale here. There is a newly formed association, a cooperative of informal waste workers, which is helping to improve the business skills and the working conditions and access to health insurance for some of these workers. It's an initiative that Practical Action has actually been working on with support from the European Union over the last few years that's really beginning to help, but there's a lot more that could be done along those lines. So overall, what we find is that across all the case studies is that we know that informal waste workers are at the front line of recovery and recycling. This tends to be a male-dominated business. It's youth-dominated business in Africa in particular, and that there are a lot of skills involved here: sorting, grading, cleaning, processing waste, and understanding waste value chains. But at the same time, there are poor working conditions. Women face further discrimination, while associations and cooperatives are beginning to form and are supporting informal waste workers. But we need to be creating partnerships and improving the working conditions for these kinds of workers, whilst making the most of the skills and expertise that they have. So our final case study is from the town of Dhenkanal in Odisha state in India. The key thing we'll focus on message here is around how best can we integrate the voice of those who are most affected, and why does that matter? This is quite a different story. Back in about 2015, the access to basic services and waste management in the town was poor. But from August 2019, the municipality launched a major solid waste management drive, and it did that through a number of investments, and including contracting with a private-public partnership, a private company to supervise and deliver collection services, and to operate a number, around 5, new material recovery and micro-composting centres set up across the town, together with the municipality staff who are still providing some collection services. This massively increased the collection rate, with services reaching 97% of households. And people are encouraged to separate their waste for collection with these trucks into dry and wet waste. What about the waste traders, though, who were already working in this town? One of them mentioned to us that they said they're disappointed. We make the city cleaner and contribute to the solid waste management in the city, but our efforts are not recognised by the municipality. If we look at the waste aware indicator wheel for this, we'll see that actually what's happened is that quite good coverage has been achieved in Dhenkanal. The waste collection coverage up here, and some of the quality of waste collection here, for example, has really improved through those kind of and the financial sustainability indicator here through some new charges which have been introduced by the municipality has definitely is one of the highest that we found. But there are a couple of aspects here which touch on the inclusivity of voices. The inclusivity for users is part of the indicators for the quality of waste collection and user inclusivity here. And for providers, it's under provider inclusivity and the quality of 3 Rs provision. For user inclusivity, it's actually a little bit better than it is for providers. And that's because although they've contracted this new company, the other providers, informal, the vibrant recycling and recovery businesses are not part of the new system. So I think there are two aspects of how we need to include people's voices. One of the things that still remains a problem in Den Canal, we found, are some of the way that there still needs to be changes to people's attitudes and approaches to solid waste management. In the slum communities, 2/3 of people still said that throwing litter on the street was fine because it's someone else's responsibility to clear it up. We also know across all of our case studies that women are in charge of managing waste at household level, and beyond that, everyone is responsible for their behaviours in terms of littering and so on in the community. So there needs to be an ongoing effort to make sure that behaviour change campaigns and so on are targeting at the right people and from the perspective of users. Secondly, none of the waste businesses that we interviewed had any relationship with the local authority. It's a small town. Those businesses, we found that they sometimes work together to sell collectively for greater bargaining power. And we discovered that even though the amounts of dry and recyclable waste that are being handled by those municipal centres has increased, we found it was still less than the amounts being handled by just a single waste trader. So ongoing work to improve partnership could really help take this towns onto an even better level. So overall, in terms of inclusive decision making, we know that sometimes local authorities have looked to infrastructure investments as their way out of the waste crisis. And while this can be important, there's a need to improve systems, services, and working in collaboration with the good things that people are already doing. This needs operating budgets as much as one-off investments. But we recognise this can be challenging when budgets are already stretched with many competing responsibilities at the local level. People need a greater say as well at the city level. We need to hear the realities of women, youth, low-income residents, and to effectively channel the sort of volunteer efforts that we found exist in all of these towns as well, and haven't had time to cover much today. And the need to build on the expertise and contribution of informal workers and to build trust, which is often quite broken with local authorities. At the same time, cities themselves need a bigger voice in national and global processes, because often it's nation states that are represented and cities don't have a big enough voice. So nationally and globally, environmental waste policies need to champion the benefits of improved service for the poorest communities. So what does this mean overall and looking forwards? I mean, I think it's worth saying that our work has picked up on the threads that many of you who are on the call have championed over the years, but we hope that what it does is bring a clearer and grounded messages together in one place, the need for people-first approaches which consider waste services for and by people as much as volumes, infrastructure, and environmental impact. The challenges in the sector are only going to grow in the coming years, but it's great to see that some attention is turning to more focus on the waste sector, with things like attentions to marine plastic, to the opportunities in the circular economy, to the need for green businesses. There are new innovations and exciting things happening in terms of using digital technology to improve businesses and making useful products out of more elements of the waste stream. But for all of these initiatives and new things to succeed and be sustained and ensure that the poorest people actually benefit from them, we need to start with people, with women in households, with the skills of informal pickers, collectors and traders, with the enthusiasm of community champions, and with the willingness of local authorities to address one of their highest priority issues, building capacities and voice for them. And that is the mission that we will be seeking to work on as we move forward as Practical Action and taking on some of these messages and what we'd love to do in partnership with you. So that comes to the end of the report. As I said at the beginning, this has been a huge joint effort and so many people to thank, in particular our publishing company, Practical Action Publishing. You can now download the report and all the associated materials at the website that's here on a line, practicalaction.org, Managing Our Waste. Following on from this launch, we're also going to have events at the local level in Kenya, Bangladesh, in India, and also in Senegal. So look out for those if that's where you're located. And for further updates and news, you can, of course, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And to contact us, we'd love to hear more of your views. Then there's some of the contact details there. So do download the full report and all the materials that are available as a 4-page briefing and the report itself. Okay, so now we have an opportunity to, as we've rumped through the report itself, to have a few minutes for a little bit of question and answer. I want to make sure we have enough time for the panel. So we're going to move on to Sarah, who I think has been checking in the chat box in case there are any questions and answers. We'll be able to take a few of those now.
Thank you so much, Lucy and Noemi. Thank you. You can see there is such a wealth of detail in this report. It's painted such a picture that brings the realities to life and also enables us to really understand where the real problems lie in different places, and therefore to think carefully about solutions. So please do put questions in the chat. I have been keeping a close eye and we've already got quite a number. And Lucy, I know there's a time challenge, so whenever you want us to move on, you just tell me. But I will organize some questions right now. So just to give people a bit of time to prepare, we had a couple of questions about the definition of waste services, which I think we'll take in a minute. There was a very specific question about Kisumu and the statistics around waste separation at 21%, but recycling only at 10%. And if you had an understanding of what that discrepancy is, that came in from David Wilson. And then we had a question about the extent to which you'd looked at the issue relating to child waste pickers in either across all of the case studies or whether that was a particular issue in certain cities. I think there's a few more coming in, but Lucy and Noemi, do you want to start with those while I look at what else is coming in now?
Very briefly on the specific Kisumu question, what we found is that 21% of households, that's the percent of households, were separating waste. And what that translates into is about 10% of the entire volume of waste being separated and recycled. That's our estimate. So that's the discrepancy there. It's slightly different units. Waste services, we look at four elements to create the ladder of waste services that focus on access to a collection or service or a disposal point, the quality of that service, the impact on the neighborhood, immediately surrounding neighborhood of the house that people live in, because people want their street and immediate vicinity to be clean, and the extent to which they separate waste for into different fractions for collection. So a combination of those is what creates the definition.
And actually, Lucy, while you've been talking about the separation statistics in Kisumu, a very interesting question has come in from Harrison Quach about Bangladesh, where the waste separation was very high. 84% is the figure that he'd taken away from your report. And there was a question about why that's so good in Bangladesh and lessons for other countries.
And I realized you had another question about child waste, because so 84% of households in not 84% of the waste, but 84% of households separate some fraction of waste for recycling. I think it may be to do with the the markets that exist for particular kinds of waste, and just a kind of more mature market for purchasing recyclable materials in Bangladesh. But I know we have some people in the panel who may be able to pick up on that point, who are coming from Bangladesh and also in India, where I think there's a degree of this as well, which could be interesting. We didn't focus specifically on child waste pickers. The service providers that we interviewed as part of the survey, none of them were children, but when we looked at some of their stories, we recognized, and the stories they told us were that they had often started work as children in this sector. So we recognize that this is a problem, and that it's often a form of employment of last resort, perhaps a way sometimes of it's a choice between that or there are worse choices that people make. So it's not something that we would support. We didn't interview a lot of people, but it certainly does exist.
Thanks, Lucy. So a couple more very interesting questions. One from Grant Haggith, just asking about the relation between solid waste management collection and then sewage collection. And then some specific questions about different types of waste. So I think you highlighted in one city the particular problem around single-use nappies and menstrual pads, and if there was ideas for how to tackle that. And then some questions around tackling the challenges with organic waste, and whether actually having a value stream coming out of that, such as biogas, can that help? So some big questions in there, and I know we're pushed for time, but maybe you can give us a flavour, and perhaps there'll be more of these type of follow-ups can happen either through the panel or, of course, afterwards.
Fantastic. Noemi, I think that some of these would be great for you to chip in with, especially around the links between solid waste management and sanitation.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for many years with Lucy, and this is something that's very striking in Nakuru, in Kisumu, where I personally spent more time in looking at the sustainability of pit latrines and visiting communities that have received support to build pit latrines, and you open the door and those pits are full with solid waste. And the conversations quickly lead to the lack of solid waste collection as a main challenge. So you cannot really solve the sanitation issue if you don't look at waste management and the other way around. They're completely linked with one another. And I think that links to another question I just saw in the chat that Sophie has just put around the kind of recommendations that we can come up with when we say, well, improving waste collection doesn't really help improving recycling. Why is that? Why are municipalities putting so much effort on trying to build up the collection level, and yet it doesn't really solve the recycling? And I think there's something around what you said, Lucy, around the behavior change and the awareness of households and what they can resort to with what they have in terms of separating that waste. If someone comes to collect it, fair enough. If no one comes, then the pit latrine is an option, then the open burning is an option. And in terms of recycling, then there's elements around the cost for service providers. So when you speak in Kisumu with waste collectors and recyclers, there's only so much that they can do in terms of recovering operational costs. Nairobi is 9 hours away, minimum, driving. So the cost of transporting bulk recyclable waste all the way to the main companies based in Nairobi who can do the recycling is huge. So I think that's also a big barrier of like how isolated a city is from the main recycling hubs in the country.
Thanks, Noemi. And actually that links to a couple of other comments and questions that are coming in, which is there is obviously some profitability in this, and there's some really interesting questions about to what extent do we understand business models. You were talking about some of the limiting factors there. I mean, that's a very big set of questions, but it's great to see that coming through as well. I also saw a really nice comment from Sonia Dias from Uyghur, Togo, suggesting some potential collaboration in Senegal. So please keep those types of comments coming through because we've got people with such a lot of different expertise and networks, but a lot of focus and the same kind of values, I think, in types of the change that we want to see. So as you think about potential collaboration options, please keep those coming in. Lucy, I'm aware that we've had 10 minutes. There's quite a few more questions, but I think this is such a big topic. We will have lots of other follow-up opportunities, as you've discussed, haven't you?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And we will be able to answer some of those later via email. So apologies, but I think we're going to have to move on to our panel now so that we have enough time for people. And perhaps some of these questions will be addressed there as well. Thank you very much. So I'd like to move on to our panel discussion now. We have got 6 people lined up. It's, I think, possibly Mahashweta from WWF India has been unfortunately called away by an emergency, which means that she is not able to join us. So we'll have 5 people join us, and from a whole wide range of different aspects. But I'm very delighted that I think what we'll do is start with some of the people who are really at the front line of this situation. We have Mrs. Aklima Akhtar with us from Bangladesh, from the town of Faridpur, who can tell us a little bit about what it's like and what some of the challenges are that she's facing as a waste worker herself in Bangladesh. Are you able to join us from Bangladesh?
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Good afternoon from Bangladesh. I am Alamin, working with Practical Action. We are really glad to participate in such kind of program. Now I am introducing Mrs. Aklima Akhtar, who is a frontliner waste worker of Faridpur municipality. She is also a member of registered cooperative of waste worker. About 25 member of their cooperative. She is one of them. Now I am requesting to Aklima Akhtar to share his e-space. Aklima Akhtar.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। আপনারা আমার এখানে ডাক পাচ্ছেন। আমার নাম আকলিমা আক্তার। আমি বজ্র ব্যবস্থাপনা একজন কর্মী, সমবায় সমিতির একজন সদস্য অথবা ক্যাশিয়ার। কিন্তু আমি যে বজ্র ব্যবস্থাপনা যে কাজটা করি, আসলে তো আমার নিজের জীবনের জন্য অনেক ঝুঁকিপূর্ণ কাজ। এটা আমার হাতের গ্লোভস, পারবুক, মুখের মাস্ক এগুলা সময় মতো পাইনি। তারপরে আমাদের হাত দিয়ে পিটাইয়ে ওইগুলা গুঁড়ো করা লাগে। কিন্তু আমাদের যদি গুঁড়া করার একটা মেশিন বা চালার জন্য একটা মেশিন, আর যে পচনশীল গুলো আমরা আলাদা করি, প্লাস্টিক বা কাগজপাতি অনেকগুলা, ওই যে একটা মেশিন যদি আমরা পাইতাম, তা আমার কামের জন্য অনেক সুযোগ সুবিধা পেতাম। আসলে যে কাজটা করি, আমাদের সমাজে আমাদেরকে মূল্যায়ন করেন না। কিন্তু আপনারা সবাই সমাজে, পৌরসভা বা আপনারা আছেন যারা সমাজে, যাতে আমাদের মূল্যায়ন করে ভাবে করেন। আর আমি যে কাজটা করি আসলে নিজের ঝুঁকিপূর্ণ, কিন্তু আমাদের বেতন কম, একে সীমিত বেতন দেয়, তার জন্য আমাদের তো চলা খুব কঠিন। তারপরে যে রাস্তাঘাটে ঝাড়ু দেয়, আমরা আসলে তো যে কাজটা করি রাস্তাঘাটে ঝাড়ু দেয়, ওদের জন্য একটা বাথরুমের দরকার রাস্তায়। তারপরে সমিতি
I'm just going to see if we can get Alamin just to jump in briefly now, because so we can have translation and a bit of your speaking and a bit more translation, so that we catch some of what you're saying. I don't want to cut you short, but I want to make sure that we're getting the translation as well as after a short amount.
Okay, yes, she can speak and I can translate his voice. Thank you so much, Aklima Akhtar. Though she has been suffering from seasonal cold, despite this, she has participated in this event. So thank you so much, Aklima Akhtar. Now I am trying to highlight two key points of her speech. She introduced herself as Aklima Akhtar, who works in the municipality waste management. Basically, she is a waste segregator of FT of Faridpur municipality. She is also a member of a registered cooperative of waste work. worker. She and as the men and women like her who have been involved with themselves in such kind of work, risky job and waste manager. She considered this workplace. She shared that considering her workload, their payment is very low. The working in the daily wage basis, and she mentioned that the person is woman. There are the discrimination in terms of salary and benefit. Always they are excited to health risks. There are lack of friendly work environment, absence of sufficient equipment like gumboot, masks, apron. She mentioned that. She also mentioned that there is the lack of public toilet for women waste worker. She also mentioned that there is a lack of beard of undignified job. When they started this job, people of their community is the undignified for them and for their work. So she wants to their salary increase. She wants the technology support for that could make their work less harder, better working condition, and respect from the community as well as city dwellers, so that they can improve their and improve their dignified life and ensure their life. And further, she said that they are cooperative. They are involving in cooperative that are they able to stay together, save money, and take a loan from needed, and raise their collective voice through the cooperative. For their rights and dignity. Finally, she drawn attention to all of present and including policymakers to make a development of municipality as well as their development and dignity. Basically, she is emphasized. She is work load and she has a better work condition. She looked dignity. She like technology support for their better job. She mentioned in their speech. Basically, she emphasized this phase. Thank you so much, Lucy, from our side. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Was there anything else that that Mrs. Akhtar wanted to? There was so much that was covered there. Was there anything else that she wanted to get to before I asked you to come in and translate? Because I realized that there maybe she might have a last thing to say. It's fantastic that the work of the cooperative that is really trying to improve things. So does she feel like her relationship with the local authority has improved as a result of that, for example?
Yes, example আছে যে কোঅপারেটিভ করে আপনাদের লাভ হইছে কোঅপারেটিভ করে কি লাভ হইছে
কোঅপারেটিভ করে লাভ হইছে আমাদের যেমন আমরা আমাদের নিজের সমিতি থেকে নিজেরাই ঋণ নিবার পারি কোনোটা বিপদে আসলো ওখান থেকে টাকা নিয়ে খরচ করে আবার বেতন পাইলে জায়গায় ছেড়ে দিই এভাবে আমাদের একটা লাভজনক হইতেছে
She said that under their cooperative, they can manage their saving and they can collect their loan. And in this case, she managed their difficult situation. She managed to collect loan from the cooperative. And explained that in this case, she managed to, she also said that she can raise their voice by the cooperative. That's all.
Okay, so that does seem to be one way that is really making an important difference in helping to have their voices heard, it's fantastic that people like her are, you know, these are people who are at the front line of providing a service every day. Like we heard in the video, if it wasn't there, people would abandon the cities in no time. So thank you so much for those thoughts. Let me turn as well from the local authority perspective now to John Sunday, who comes to us from Kisumu, where he's working for Kisumu County government. We've heard that there are challenges, but also that Kisumu City has actually got a really good strategy in place, but it's not always easy to implement that. What kind of challenges does your department face in providing a really good waste service to everyone? I know this is a priority, but it's you know, it's not always easy. What are the challenges that are there for you? And welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lucy, for this opportunity, and thanks for inviting me to this forum.
We can't hear you. Your sound has gone off for a moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Sorry,
Great.
sorry about that. My name is John Sande. I work for the county government of Kisumu in the Department of Environment at the city of. Is it okay now? Somebody's muting me.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So as I was saying,
yes,
solid waste management is one of the biggest challenges in the city of Kisumu. And as a department, it falls directly under our docket. Some of the challenges that we face as a department include resource constraints. The department is not adequately resourced in terms of finances for us to be able to provide adequate services. In Kisumu, for a long time, we have also suffered problems of poor urban planning. So you find that there's a lot of, there is a slum belt, an informal settlement belt around the core of the city. And in the informal settlement, as in many places, you find that in terms of infrastructure, there's very poor infrastructure. So accessibility, even to provide services, becomes a challenge. Kisumu is rapidly urbanizing. So we find that there is a huge population that moves into the city. Being a regional hub, we also have a large population that comes from the other smaller towns for services within the city at daytime. So there's a lot of population to be dealt with. There are a lot of people who move in to look for opportunity in the city because of rapid urbanization leading to the sprawling slums. We have a poor attitude of the residents towards waste management. For example, and I like what Naomi had mentioned, that there is very little segregation of waste in Kisumu as it were now. So meaning that communities still don't appreciate the value of waste. There is also low levels of technology within the department to enable us move in tandem with the times. There is the attitude of not in my backyard. It's very prevalent, and that has been a very big challenge, even in terms of identifying a site where we can build a modern waste disposal facility. And it was mentioned by an earlier presenter that there is a waste disposal facility right in the middle of town. It's been a challenge to move it to an appropriate place because nobody seems to want it in their backyards. So that's a challenge that we're having. Kisumu largely, much as we have a very good strategy document in the name of the Kisumu Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan, the KISWAM, we have not really implemented it well, especially the business model aspect of it. And we have realized that the business model actually drives sustainable waste management because the business model provides incentives and provides value in the form of waste. So you find that there's a lot of more interest that people can have in terms of managing waste well. So those are just quickly some of the few challenges that I can mention as a department. If you don't mind, can I proceed that mention some few challenges that we are facing? Because in Kisumu, we are moving into turning waste into a resource. In our strategy, we have the TAKA, waste is money centers. In the local language, we call it Taka ni pesa, meaning waste is money, or waste is a resource. So we are currently piloting a project, and thanks to UN Habitat, who are supporting Kisumu. And I'm happy I've seen Francesca is here. She's one of the key people who are really supporting Kisumu, together with the Civil Society Urban Development Platform, CSUDP, who are supporting us. And in this aspect, as a city, we are trying to package the waste sector as a business so that the department can then partner with private sector and the community groups in pushing forward the people-centered public-private partnership, so that we have waste being managed by private sector. And private sector, we know they have more efficiency than government because they look at it first and foremost as a business. So in our project, dubbed Turning Waste into Jobs, we are working in partnership with UN Habitat, Civil Society Urban Development Platform, who are providing technical support. And we want to support community-based waste management and establish an enabling framework for a public-private people partnership in low-income areas and informal settlements in the city. We have also partnered with a network, an umbrella organization of local waste practitioners in the name of Kiwan, Kisumu Waste Actors Network, who are the people on the ground in the form of the waste pickers, the private waste transporters, the waste recyclers. They have come together under an umbrella called the Kisumu Waste Actors Network, and it is providing an effective partnership with which we are able now to move and reach out to the community more effectively.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. No, that sounds like that those initiatives, we wish you all the best with that. And those, I think even more of those kinds of partnerships sound like they may be some of the ways that can help you take things forward. Just as we're trying to make sure that we hear from all of our panelists, let me thank you very much for those thoughts and wish you the best with some significant challenges. And let me pass over to onto Lucy Slack, who is the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. So perhaps, Lucy, you can tell us, now we've heard from John, who's there sitting at the city level. What are you hearing from your members right across the world who are in a similar situation? Can you tell us something about the forum itself and who you represent?
Thanks very much, Lucy, and thanks for the presentation on the research, which looks fascinating and is something that we'll definitely share across our members, because this is, as you hint in your question, something which is a major priority for cities and local governments across the Commonwealth. And as an organisation, we represent individual cities, local government associations and ministries with responsibility for local government from across the 54 member states of the Commonwealth. And one of our jobs is really to pick up on one of the things which you mentioned in your last slide when you were doing your presentation, which is really how do we get the voice of cities strongly into global and national policy debates. So one of the things that we're focusing on very heavily is how we can ensure that local governments have a strong voice in debates that impact directly on them, whether that's around work that we're doing in the Commonwealth to highlight the importance of cities and the importance of thinking about the role of cities in our development and the functions that they play, but also highlighting really the complexity that exists within cities and the kind of shift, and I think your report highlights this really strongly, around moving to a much more people-centered and much more participatory approach to building the kind of cities that we want to see. And how can we ensure then that national policies actually enable and support cities to be able to do that more effectively? Many of the issues which John just mentioned as being challenges for Kisumu are challenges for cities you'll appreciate across the Commonwealth. Issues around resourcing, around capacity, but also around having the powers and functions to be able to really deliver effectively on waste collection, waste management, support to small businesses that are involved in waste collection, and really planning, which is, as we know, at the heart of this. And also I would add another issue to that, which is a challenge for many cities, which is the issue around land, availability of land and land use. And just kind of in closing, because I know you're under pressure in terms of time, I think the other way in which organizations like ours can really play a role is in bringing cities together to learn from each other, and also in highlighting the complex ecosystems that exist in cities and looking at the kind of the new ways of working that we really need to move towards in terms of thinking about how we link up all of these different actors who have such a critical role to play in cities. Cities are not just about what happens in the city hall. They are about what happens in terms of business on the ground. They are, importantly, they rely so heavily on waste pickers and on people who do many of the services that traditionally have been seen as municipal services, but they do them on a more kind of voluntary basis or as part of small businesses. So really understanding that complex ecosystem in cities. And just in closing, one of the things that we're taking to the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit later this year is actually really looking at how we can put cities much more strongly in the front line of recognizing that this is where many of the challenges that we face as countries moving towards trying to address the SDGs will happen in cities. And we certainly look forward to working with Practical Action and your partners in doing that as effectively as we can.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I think one of the things that shone through from some of our reports was how much cities were wanting to be able to do something, but facing a lot of challenges and finding the right direction for that and the most effective ways forward. So I think all of that peer learning and raising the voice of cities on the global stage is something that will be really crucial in taking that forward. So thank you very much for those thoughts to widen us up to that level. The other actors who are really crucial in this are some of the private sector actors who are helping to shape things. We have Mr. Shamim Ahmed, who is president of the Bangladesh Plastic Goods Manufacturers and Exporters Association, on the line. Good afternoon, Mr. Ahmed.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. My regards to Lucy, my regards to Sarah and the Caspar, everyone. Do you hear me well?
Yes, you are coming through very, very clearly. Thank you very much for being here. Now, obviously, as a private representative of private sector plastic companies, maybe you can tell us a bit about the scale of your association and who you represent, and what you feel you can do to help with the kind of challenge of using more recycled plastic.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I'm grateful that you invited me to this session. And I tell you, because Plastic Association is representing around 5,000 industries of the country, totally, and we have many recyclers. The plastic in those recyclers are also our members, and they're recycling it and also supplying to the supply chain for the consumption of the industry for the manufacturing process. And above all, there are different types of plastic industry like PVC pipe, the flexible packaging, the toys, household products, and so many things. You know? Around 28 subsectors in the plastic sectors are working very well. And we insist that, and I salute the waste worker, and particularly the lady talked just a few minutes before, Aklima. I salute that how they work, how they support to keep the environment clean and keep the sustainability, and how they help us to attain the SDG goal. So this is the way how we are proceeding. And as you know, globally about 2 billion tons of waste is generating now. And since the Bangladesh is one of the low income country, around 2,500 per capita income, so our waste generation is less. But of course, we have a lot of mismanaged plastic and mismanaged waste, you know, that need to be cared of. But again, you know, that Bangladesh, as you mentioned during your study, that in Satkhira, maybe 84% of the waste is, you said, the segregated and well managed. Is a very good for us, as you mentioned during your speech. But again, you know, the recycling industry, as far as some study has been made, that 50% of the plastic, mismanaged plastic, is recycling. And it is again in the circular economy coming back to the industry, and we are making the products, and we are also delivering these products into the different stages. So solid waste management is very important, and plastic is helping, because in the solid waste management, there is so many ingredients, like the way more weight product is there. And so if you want to convert this into the waste to energy, the plastic waste helps to generate more energy. So you can use it more properly. So what I said that the plastic waste is very negligible in compared to the total solid waste. Plastic waste in maybe 10% or maybe below, In one study, we found that around 123 metric tons of plastic waste is generating in the Dhaka city. About 7 and 8 containers. It is not very big deal. It can be managed very well. But what I would like to say that globally, that we should come forward with a mechanism, with a system that can be applied to the developing country like Bangladesh. We have a lot of cities, small cities, around the country. But we have to have a system, a successful system we can introduce to the local government that can introduce. Many developing countries have the same system in Asia that you can introduce. I know in Indonesia have the same problem like Bangladesh, have same problem in Thailand. So if we can develop a system that can be introduced into our small cities, that is good for us, that will help for the waste management. And I'd like to tell you that waste management, particularly waste management of the plastic coming from the thin plastic, particularly the thin plastic is very difficult to collect. It is not rewarding for the collector. And because if you work all the day, collection is very few, but that is not rewarding. That is the problem area. But solid waste, like the bigger plastic collection, if they collect the waste collector, they can earn more money. So what I would like to say, we must develop the industry, waste industry, forward industry, like the waste can be converted into wealth, like we can make the solid waste, solid wood, we can recover the fuel from the plastic, we can make the waste plastic into some other resources that can be used for the. So if we develop the upward industry, then the waste collecting will be more remunerative. We can give them the more. And again, I would like to say that the waste collector must be taken care of, because they are helping us for the sustainability, for the SDG attainment. So we must take care of this waste worker, and my salute, my regards to them. And we must come forward from all civil society to help them out, this worker. I don't know if I am out of my time. If I am out of time, please remind me so I can stop immediately.
No. Well, we are running a little over on the allotted time we had for the webinar. And as you were mentioning about some of those plastics for which there is not currently a really good market and processing, I thought this would be the ideal moment to thank you, but to bring in our final panelist, who can perhaps help with this question of how to deal with some of those really tricky to deal with kinds of plastic.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you for your contributions to thinking about what it is that industries can do in all of this and what's needed. We are just going to hear from, just in terms of time management, we will hear from our final panelist, because I know he has a lot to share with a lot of value to add, and then we will be wrapping up a few minutes later. For those of you who are able to hang on for another 5 minutes or so, that would be fantastic as we wrap up. So just passing on to Yash Deval, who works for River Recycle. Yash, tell us something about what River Recycle does, where you're working, and how you can address some of those difficult to deal with types of waste that Mr. Ahmed was just talking about.
Oh, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Practical Action, for giving us opportunity to participate in this webinar. Basically, River Recycle is a Finland-based company. We have our headquarters in Helsinki. We are basically aiming to stop the river plastic getting into the oceans, and we collect the plastic from the rivers, and we do the sorting at the site. Then we send it for the respective recycling, like mechanically recycled plastic it goes to the mechanical recycling process and or chemically recycling process. So we have got a holistic approach because we are not happy to clean the river every time, but we want that we should have some kind of a, preventive healthcare for the rivers. So by saying so, what we do is basically we run the campaigns in the communities living around the river area. We create awareness, we educate them how to segregate the waste at the source, so that the segregation at the source is the biggest challenge is the entire waste management everywhere, wherever we have the challenges. So we educate them how to segregate this and send it to the respective processes. Then we train them to to be employed in the other waste management companies also. And within our concept, we says that river cleaning as a free service. That means we are not charging anything from the river authority or municipal corporation. And for that, we have our self-sustained model where we create value through the chemically recycling process. So, and we have a lot of direct and indirect employment creating within the concept. Like we, employ a lot of people from the communities or some areas living around the rivers. For two reasons, they get the livelihood, and secondly, they travel every day from their work to home. They always interact with the people where they're going, and then they understand how big is this challenge is, and they feel proud, that we are contributing something for the environment for future generation. So that is the concept we have, and I believe that we should have a PPP mode where current definition of PP is public-private partnership. But here, first P stands for the people. Actually, it has to be for the people and by the people. If we can make it a people's movement, then yes, we can bring the challenge. And sometimes, as I agree with the Lucy, that there are a lot of challenges with the government, within the government, because capacity is another challenge, then their funding is challenge, then resources is challenge. So wherein the private sector has to collaborate with the government, and within our system, we are looking for people to come and collaborate with us. I invite a lot of college people to come and see the operation, understand the challenge. And likewise, I'm looking at some other recyclers who can process the other fractions also. So, and typically, if you look at the river waste challenge, then it is very difficult. Nobody takes the ownership of that, because people say that it has come from the upstream, and for the people living around the river, for them river is the best and most efficient way of throwing the waste into the river, because they get rid of the problem. So this is the big challenge. And within plastic is something which is basically, I believe that in modern world it is one of the most versatile innovation actually. But the usage of plastic is creating bad mouth about this, very unique product. So we have to have some kind of awareness among the people. So that's all about. And currently we are working in Mumbai on Mithi River with the Mumbai Metropolitan Development Authority. And then we have a Mithi consortium. It is funded by the Huhtamaki, which is a Finnish packaging company. And other thing I would like to mention that, when we have some kind of a PPP partnership or other projects running in the cities or with the government, then political will is one of the best incentive we could get actually. And I would like to mention, the Honorable Environment Minister of Maharashtra, Mr. Aditya Thackeray, is personally looking into this project, and that's creating a lot of value, because, interdepartment coordination, and these are the biggest challenges within the government, Lucy would understand. So that is where we are blessed. So it has to be an integrated solution backed by a lot of partnerships, and sustainability is the key success factor for all these projects. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And what I love about what you just said is the extent to which, although your solution focuses on a particular element of the waste stream, actually you're looking at holistic solutions which help people to deal with their waste more widely, and making sure that benefits come to some of the poorest waste pickers in the city, and to communities as well as having a solution that addresses a particular type of waste which is not easy to deal with otherwise, and otherwise, like you say, people find it easy just to throw their waste into the river. So I think that your solution is actually quite holistic and dealing with things from that perspective as well. So we've heard from a really wide range of panelists. Thank you so much to all of you for such a diversity of voices, of issues raised, but all of you, I think, highlighting as well the extent to which the solutions that we need to look for are about systems. They're about who are the actors within them, and how do those actors operate, so that we can put people back at the heart of our thinking, which will help us to deal with this massive waste management crisis that is facing us, and we're all looking for the best ways to deal with. Just as we close, Francesca, coming back to you, I know we've kept you hanging on for a few minutes, but perhaps you can help us to close our session today.
Yes, for sure, with pleasure. Well, first, let me start thanking, well, first you, Practical Action, for this very useful report, and also for using our Waste-Wise Cities tool, and inviting UN Habitat to co-launch the event. And thank you also to all the speakers for sharing their experience, which I think was extremely insightful, and for all those who attended and participated and contributed to the discussion. Just to, I think from this discussion, we can say that the report highlighted some important aspects. Number one is the need for data, quantitative data, but also qualitative data, which at the moment are lacking, especially in the Global South. And this data can help us to design effective and sustainable interventions together with the people. Number two,
hold on 1 second, please.
Number two, that we need to not only focus on the flow of the recyclables and the waste, but we also need to look at the people.
Yeah, so I just think that we just have to.
And then the fact that people receive waste collection services does not mean that we have waste-free environment, which is resulting in negative impacts on the health and the quality of life of the people who are exposed to this uncollected waste, and that often push people to do unsustainable practices like waste burning. And we also need like interventions and policy level, that the policy looking at solid waste management should be inclusive for these waste services. Another important point, which is also a trend that UN Habitat observed, is that very often the informal waste sectors and the waste speakers, who are really the pillar for providing material like recyclables to the recycling companies and support this circular economy model, are very often under-recognized. Not only under-recognized, but also discriminated and sometimes even criminalized, while in fact their contribution to climate change mitigation and circular economy is huge, especially in the developing countries. So we really need to work with the informal sector and also with the informal sector, and make sure that their voice is heard and they are included in the discussion of how to improve the solid waste management sector. And also there are so many examples of innovative solutions. Even Kisumu brought up how we can develop a solution that brings together the private sector, the public, and also the people, that again should be at the center of our way of making actions. And then also we need stronger action and stronger enforcement of the principles of the polluters pay. And this should help us to develop more extended producer responsibilities regulations, and making sure that if some products cannot be recycled, then the producers should be responsible for these products, for the disposal and recovery of the products. And the EPR fees should again go to support especially waste collection services in the informal settlements where people cannot afford to pay the service. And finally, the need for an holistic approach that take into consideration all the actors of the waste chain and of course the environment. Yeah, and I think that's it, because I see we are very running late. But thank you. And
thank you so much. It's been such a rich session. I think it's great to have your reflections at the end. Thank you to everybody who's participated today. Please do, you can see where you are able to find out more information about the report. The session is being recorded, and we'll make it available to people, everybody afterwards. So please do feel free to share information with all of your networks and people who you think might be interested. So once again, thank you so much again to all of our excellent panelists and other contributors who have helped to put this session together. Casper for helping to manage everybody on the Zoom, and everybody else who's been involved. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.